Hi, everyone. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Kutarna. Welcome to the Exemplary Catholic Leaders series. Today, we have Mark Emerson Donnelly. He's a composer, a conductor of Scolas and choirs. He's a chant expert, and he's a husband and father of 9. So we'll talk about Mark in a second here. Just a little note about the Catholic CEO. Don't forget to check us out. Our website is thecatholicCEO.com. And we have courses, webinars. We have a daily email that may be of use to you in your business. We have the St. Joseph Forums, which are for groups of CEOs. We do one-on-one coaching and mentoring. And we also have an important project that we're starting that has attracted a couple of hundred people already. And it's called the Catholic Economy, ways for Catholics to work together to form a Catholic economy that is in the world, but not of it. So back to our guest today, Mark Emerson Donnelly. Mark, how's it going today?
It's going very well. Thank you for having me, Henry.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, Mark, it's our tradition on this broadcast to check out what's happened in your faith life. Maybe you could begin by telling us, who you are, first of all, and what do you do, but what's your faith journey? This is something that we want to understand about you. And later I'm going to ask you about your work and things like that. But your faith journey is of interest to our audience.
Well, I wouldn't call myself exactly a revert, but I never stopped going to Mass. That was probably because of the influence of my older brother. Um, but when I was about 15, I was at Mass, and it just struck me that Jesus was truly present in the Blessed Sacrament.
Mm.
And if he was going to come down and make himself present on the altar when I was at Mass for my sake, then I had to do something for him. And that's really when it started. I was either 15 or 16. And so, again, it was great. My brother was very influential in keeping me going to church until I realized that I wasn't going to church for his sake, or really because God was asking me. I was going to church for my sake. That's why there's Sunday obligation.
Yes,
It's
indeed.
not that God needs us to be there, it's that we need to be there.
Yes, yes.
So it's like telling your kids to eat their vegetables, you know, or don't run out into the street. We do those things because our parents tell us to do those things, not because it's good for them, even though if anything happened to us, they would be sad.
Yes.
But it's of far greater importance to us. So from that point, we just tried to, since took piano lessons when I was a kid, and then became a trombone player, and eventually a singer. In fact, I didn't sing at all. It was great in grade 4. I went to a Catholic school. In grade 4, our teacher, who was a nun, Ursuline nun, told me not to sing because I couldn't sing in tune.
Really, this is the chant expert, Mark Emerson Donnelly, was told not. This is interesting, Mark. Very
So,
interesting.
well, it was fine with me. I was more interested in hockey.
Hmm.
So not singing in class or at Mass, that was fine with me in grade 4.
Yeah.
Um, but I did like music. I just didn't like singing. In fact, I told my brother when he was going to UBC, University of British Columbia, and he was had a concentration in voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I said, well, singing's not really an instrument because you don't press any buttons. So he could have come back to me, I guess, and said, well, trombone, you don't press any buttons either.
Right. Right.
Unless you're Bob Brookmeyer. That goes back a ways. You remember Bob Brookmeyer from
Yeah.
Toronto?
There's some
Alt trombone
stories.
player.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so we started doing, I was going to Mass, and then the parish priest, the assistant at the parish, asked my brother to do some music for the 8 o'clock folk mass, 8 o'clock in the evening on Sunday. And I don't think he really asked me. I just happened to be with my brother. And so we started a folk choir between grade 10 and grade 11 in the summer. And that's when I started singing, just because, my friends were singing, my Catholic friends. So I started singing along, and the next fall, I auditioned for the musical because my brother was always in musical theater when he was in high school. And I got the lead in Leslie Burcuse's musical version of The Christmas Carol. So I played Scrooge. I got the lead. I was auditioning for the chorus, and then the guy kept coming back to me while everybody's singing, and then just stood in front of me and then pointed his finger up like he wanted me to sing louder. And I thought, okay. I think probably if anybody has a problem with me being too loud, they can blame the director back in grade 11.
Back in grade 11, back in high school.
Yeah, Bill. Bill was his name. Oh, I can't remember what his last name was. Anyway, so I got the lead in that, and that's sort of how it started going. And I was never very good at practicing. I kind of had a natural talent for picking up wind instruments. So I didn't practice trombone that much. I didn't practice singing that much. I certainly didn't practice piano as much as I should. So what happened is I started singing more and more, and singing at church, and we were doing, St. Louis Jesuits, the Weston Priory, the Norbertines, and all that sort of thing. And then I auditioned for music school at UBC, which my brother was there also, and my trombone audition was terrible. Now, it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, the day after we got back from our band trip, upon which the bus broke down on the Lionsgate Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
So we didn't get home till really late, and you don't tend to get a lot of sleep on band trips anyway.
Yes, I remember band trips very well.
Yeah.
I do.
So anyway, I had a horrible trombone audition. And but I guess I told a lie. But I said, I wasn't sure if I was going to audition on trombone or voice. And so one of the auditioners,
yes.
Yeah. Was also the director of the touring and concert choir. He was also a French horn player. Played for, I think, in the Houston Symphony for a while. Anyway, he said, "Oh, what do you sing?" And I said, "Tenor." Well, everybody's short of tenors. So he wrote a note and he said, "Go up and see Bob Morris, head of the voice department. Tell him I told you to give him a note that I get an audition." So I auditioned. I just sang a few vocal exercises, and wouldn't you know it, I got a letter from UBC saying I was accepted in the voice program there. No mention of trombone.
Yeah. Something that
so
was forgettable.
That's how I started out as a singer. And but the most singing that I did, though, was with the folk choir, because we sang week in, week out. But when I went to UBC and we did in music history, we had a great program at UBC because the history program was paralleled with the theory program.
Yes.
So when you're studying Gregorian chant in history, you're also studying Gregorian chant in music theory, and it's really one of the few programs. They don't use it now, but it was one of the few programs at the time where you actually learned music theory in kind of a great books way, that you start at the beginning and you move chronologically through the development of theory, rather than starting in with late Baroque or early classical harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were studying Gregorian chant, and I heard this fantastic music. And we were going to church. We had a very good youth group, very committed, quite spiritual, for for the time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to this music, and it was marvelous. It was better than anything we were doing at church. And I'm looking around, and I knew there were other Catholics in my music class, and they were falling asleep.
Mm.
And so I thought, well, why can't we do this?
Sure.
And so after class, I was talking to my brother. I said, why don't we do this? And so the first mass we did was an Easter Sunday. I guess it would have been 1977. Easter Sunday. And we did Western Priory, St. Louis Jesuits, and Gregorian Chant.
Quite a combination.
And so we did the Mass of the Angels, and we did the sequence, the Victimae Paschali Laudes.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us, my brother was probably the oldest, and he was like 20. Well, he would have been 20.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of us were a little bit younger than that. There might have been a couple of older guys, 21, but not much more than that. And we just, it was a real wedding of the growth, the growth in my faith journey, to use your term, and kind of a intersection with my musical pursuits.
Mm.
And Gregorian chant seemed to me to be the most spiritual music that I'd ever heard. And it wasn't the simplest as far as tunes were concerned, but it was simple in that it was unison. It did not admit of harmony. And that was, 1977, and we're in 2022.
So you left the folk music behind at that fortuitous moment.
Yeah, it was. It's not like I didn't like the folk music.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I found something better.
Yes.
It's like if you're eating a sirloin tip, and then you taste filet mignon. It's not like you don't like sirloin tip anymore. It's just the filet mignon is way better.
You've been exposed to something much more tasty and delicious, you could say.
Yeah, especially if it has a strip of bacon wrapped around it.
Love the idea.
So that's kind of how that went. I started to encounter a few difficulties that I couldn't understand why people wouldn't like the chant.
Yes. Tell us about that. That's something that I would say still persists.
It does, and to be charitable, I just can't figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But after we did that Easter Mass, we were all excited, and so we wanted to do a Pentecost Mass, and the priest said sure. And there was no chant in our hymnals,
mm-hmm. Yes.
So the ones that we had at our church. So I asked the secretary for the parish, Alma. She was a Brazilian, a wonderful family. Mm-hmm. If she would type out the Latin
mm-hmm.
for the bulletin so people could have the words.
Sure.
And I just have them type out the Latin, not the English. moving forward back to when we're our fast forwarding to Holy Family, we wound up printing the Latin, the English, not only of the Mass, but of the motets we were doing. Made sure the hymn versions were the same so that we weren't singing a
Yes.
different words in the choir loft than what the congregation had.
Yes.
You can ask me about that later. I think all that's very important.
Mhm.
But right from the beginning, I thought, well, we need this. People need to have the words. And so I got a phone call from someone who was involved with the folk music, and she had asked the secretary to do something too, but I asked her first, so she was doing my thing. So I got a call from this other person say, why are you making Alma do all this work? And I said, well, because we're going to be singing it at Mass. He says, well, nobody knows those things.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I said, sure, everybody knows Mass of the Angels, which was funny because I'd only sung it once.
Yes. But
And
your instinct, yeah.
we had heard some older people
Hmm.
who said, oh, I remember that.
Hmm.
Because this was, I think, the greatest dearth of good liturgical music was probably the 1970s.
I was going to say it's only a decade really since certain changes occurred where some of the music was relegated.
Well, yeah, it was what 19. When was the promulgation of the new mass? It was
I think 69
1970,
was, yeah,
69,
69.
but it wasn't. It was delayed to 1970 to be implemented, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, and interestingly, Dom Gajar, who was the choir director at Salem from the 1920s till his death, he died in 1972.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe God was being merciful to him.
But
But
yeah, maybe so. But Mark, you're speaking about something. It's like a discovery in such a short period of time. Something had been forgotten in the church. You discovered it, it seems, and yet there's a tradition here in the faith of having chant for centuries. And so, talk to us about that. Was there people had forgotten about it, and it seemed to me that people forgot about it quickly.
well, it was actually kind of forgotten twice.
Hmm.
Um, the chants that we do for the propers, that is for the introit or the entrance antiphon, the gradual, the Alleluia, offertory, and communion, those reached their perfection as far as the melodies are concerned. And until it became a political issue,
Yes.
everybody in music said, okay, yeah, the restoration of the melodies by Salem was superb. It was academically rigorous,
Mhm.
and they did focus on the correct epoch as
Mhm.
far as what melodies to use, because there were conflicting repertoires, and so uh, there wasn't any conflict as far as that. Now, with regards to the rhythm, then there's all kinds of conflict and different methods, and we can talk about that later. But the uh, what happened though when so they focused on the ninth century, the 800s, and that's really where the best melodies were. That was the bloom of the rose.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
was beautiful. What happened though is in the 10th century we had someone who I really admire a lot, Guido d'Arezzo.
Mhm.
Guido's the one who came up with fixed musical notation. That is, or at least fixed relative musical notation. So that if you set one note, you'd be able to tell where all the other notes are. Before that, it was basically you knew when you went up, you knew when you went down, and that's about it.
Mhm.
So those were called heightened neumes,
Mhm.
as opposed to fixed neumes. So now you could change where do is. In fact, he's the one that came up with the scale. Guido did.
Hmm.
And what happened with that is you were able to write the chants down, which was great.
Yes.
But it also made polyphony, the development of polyphony, more possible.
Mm.
And so what happened was polyphony became so popular that the chant was neglected.
Ah, a
You know,
historical
so
point there. I was not aware of that. It seems that polyphony was a development, and it seems today when we see a traditional mass with the chant, there seems always to be polyphony accompanying that. It seems to me, and
oh,
so
you are correct. And the so what happened was is the chant more or less in many places fell into disuse.
mhm.
And then the polyphony became more and more popular, and then uh, both both in the church and in the secular world.
Mhm.
And so the chant was more and more neglected. And as much as I'm a composer and
Yes.
I write polyphony.
Yes, you do.
You know,
Yes.
I write organum, a type of organum, and organum was the first types of polyphony or harmonized music that was used with the chant. Um, and before Guido, all they could do is tell the musician what to do.
Mhm.
So you'd have Scola cantorums where the boys would have to memorize all these rules to sing polyphonically.
Mm.
I did a workshop with Sequencia many years ago, and we had a book that was that thick, and it was both double side, and it was all the rules. So that if you're going along and you go here, then these are the possibilities of where you can go. And it was a quite complex counterpoint.
Wow.
But they couldn't write it down, so they could only describe what you do.
Right.
And so the boys, you got these like 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old boys would be memorizing basically the rules of organum improvisation. So when Guido came around, he you could write the notes down,
Hmm.
and that then polyphony, since it was the new thing, became more and more popular, and then it developed all the other styles of music, and so the chant fell into not a disuse, but its performance was minimized. And that carried on until about the mid 1800s,
Oh,
until Dom Guéranger
yes.
refounded Salem.
Hmm.
And then one thing that he said is that, well, if we're monastics, we should be not just praying the office, we should be singing the office.
Uh-huh.
And so that's all fine and good, but then the next question is, well, what notes do you sing?
Right. How do you do it, and how can it be transferable from one monastery to another?
Right. So what they did is God is good. It was also the advent of photography.
Mm.
So they were able to go to the great monastic libraries and photograph the manuscripts that they had in their libraries and then take them all back to Salem
Hmm.
and then do comparative studies. And that's how they were able to restore the chant melodies.
Interesting.
But then they had to figure out, well, how do you sing it?
Hmm.
What rhythmically? It's one thing to get the notes,
Yes.
but how is it? What do you do rhythmically? Do you subdivide notes? If you give a quarter note, can you sing 2/8 notes, or can you sing a eighth note triplet? Can you do 16th notes? Is everything the same length?
Mhm.
All the notes the same length? And so, if they're all the same length, is there any rhythm? Is there no rhythm?
Hmm.
You know, people were talking about free rhythm. What does free rhythm mean?
Right.
Uh, you know, free cookies doesn't mean cookie free.
Yes. Yes.
Free cookies means that there's still cookies, you just don't have to pay for it.
Mm.
Cookie free means there's no cookies.
Yeah.
So what does free rhythm mean? You know, and so that term was bandied about, and then finally Dom Mokro came up with what is now called well, it was the old Salem method or the classic Salem method,
Hmm.
um, and which was the notion of rendering the chant in relatively um, equal lengths of notes.
Hmm.
Sometimes you speed up, sometimes you just slow down, but it's very elastic, very plastic. And but you'd render the rhythm of the melodies in groups of twos and threes,
Hmm.
which he chose those because those are the most elemental rhythmic groups. I mean, you know that as a trumpet player.
Yes.
There's nothing. I mean, four is two groups of two, right?
Yep. Yep.
You know, five is a group of two and a group of three, or a group of three and a group of two.
Hmm.
There's no real group of five. There's no real group of four.
Hmm.
There's only twos and threes.
Hmm.
And so that was the method that St. Pius X basically canonized by promoting it to the whole church.
And
And so that was,
how is it, Mark, that this reminds me of the phenomenon of when we hear chant, Gregorian chant, let us say, we believe and see that it lifts the mind and heart to God, but it does it in a form of music that doesn't seem contemporary. And one of the criticisms of, let's say, folk music or different types of music, more contemporary music at worship, at mass, is that it's contemporary. And so has it ever been contemporary as a popular type of music?
the short answer is no. The long answer is that it is a type of church music.
Hmm.
And sometimes those forms have found their way into popular forms of music.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's, though, in a kind of ridicule or mocking,
Yes. Yes.
you know. So not always, but sometimes. The Carmina Burana, which you've
Hmm.
heard of, the Carmina Burana, the
Yes.
Orff.
Yes.
Uh,
Yep.
well, the Carmina Burana manuscripts were a bunch of manuscripts that were written down by some of them were itinerant monks,
Hmm.
and some of them were very beautiful devotional hymns,
Hmm.
particularly to Our Lady. Some of them were just really debauched.
Hmm.
And so what they would take is they would take some of the church themes and turn them upside down so that they're more homage to a profligate life
Hmm.
rather than a life of holiness.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's how that was. But it was still recognized as a something holy that was being profaned.
Yes, I was about to say that that's what it reminds me. It was something that still seems holy, is holy, but was profane, was worsened. And so in a sense, you might say it really never was contemporary. It might have been contemporized in an improper way, but it wasn't really ever popular. Which, and so many people tell me that that's the appeal of chant, because it's not contemporary. It's an elevated form of worship. It does lift the mind and heart in a way that other music doesn't. And this
Well, I
is,
think that, yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. Well, yeah, I suppose where you're leading is that it is unique,
yes, yes, it is.
you know, and even polyphony.
Hmm.
is more akin to what we might hear on Spotify or Apple Music uh, than Gregorian chant is,
Hmm.
by far, by
Hmm.
far.
Yes.
Um, Polyphony is a complement. Polyphony is like um, a side dish,
Mm.
you
Interesting.
know. I think it's a little better than that. It's interesting in the Pius X's Motu Proprio on sacred music of 1903. I believe he says that polyphony is, Gregorian chant has pride of place,
Yes.
and next to that is polyphony of the classical Roman school, which would be, and he says as exemplified by Palestrina.
Aha.
So he actually names Palestrina. But I think it's telling that he says the polyphony is next to chant and not below it,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, because it's something that's there. So instead of being a side dish, it's not a side dish in the sense that it's dessert,
Right.
but rather it's, say, the vegetables that go along with the roast.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So it is a big, um, it's a big part of the meal. It's just not the main course.
Hmm. Yes.
The chant is the main course. So anyway,
Well, so it then brings us to, let's say we might just skip ahead for a moment to current times. There's a resurgence of chant, I would say, and you should tell us a little bit about that if you see it the same way. But anecdotally, I think it's happening, and I think there's a greater appreciation for it. And so, is it a counterpoint? Is it an antidote to something, or is it a natural development on its own? It's very interesting because there's a growth. It's like you go to people's homes now, and it seems that everybody has icons in their home now, not just sacred art of a certain genre or type, but icons. Listening to professional musicians and those who are interested in a more formal type of worship are saying that chant is, it's paramount. It's well, and it was said at the Second Vatican Council that chant does Latin, and chant has pride of place, and so we want to explore that. So what's happening? Is there a current revival, would you say, or is it an expansion? Why is chant seemingly popular now?
well, I think more and more people, and when I say more and more, I'm not talking about billions. It
Yeah.
still might just be a remnant, but more and more people are realizing that if you want to be truly spiritual, you have to have a certain austerity.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
chant provides you, musically provides you with that austerity. Um, if I can go farther into the polyphony,
Sure.
um, I don't I don't use 20th century or 21st century harmonic techniques
Hmm.
in my polyphony because I find it to be more profane.
Hmm.
I try to follow the classical rules of harmony,
Hmm.
and I limit myself. I think, I've recently lost 32 pounds since Valentine's Day.
This is an accomplishment.
It is.
Good for you.
But you can't lose weight if you don't deny yourself.
Yes.
So what I've discovered, which is I found works very well for me, is actually fasting.
Hmm.
And not simply a liturgical fast, but sometimes, 16-hour fast, a 24-hour fast, 36, 48. I've fasted up to uh, almost 100 hours
That
straight.
is very significant. Yes.
And uh, I think I think you find that there's good things that come out when you deny yourself.
Hmm.
And it also kind of, you need to spiritualize everything.
Hmm.
You know, the, I don't know, I've been, I'm in my 60s now. And I think one of the reasons God has had me live this long is I'm a slow learner.
Mm.
We're just um, one of the my wife and I are preparing to become Benedictine Oblates
Yes.
of
Yes.
of
God bless
uh,
you in that.
Clear Creek Monastery,
Hmm.
and uh, I've known for a long time that the best prayer book you can have is the Book of Psalms.
Hmm. Yes.
But I've always struggled to pray the Psalms regularly.
Hmm.
So, since we decided to become oblates, we've been praying some of the office every day,
Hmm.
and it's just great to sing to recite the Psalms.
Hmm.
If we're separate, then we just do it to ourselves. But at night, pretty well every night, we say Compline together,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's comforting to get those words, you know, day after day and week after week.
Yes. Yes. But you are saying that you say them. You're not. Are you chanting them? Are you singing the psalms at this
Not
point?
yet.
Not
Not
yet.
yet.
This is to
So we
come.
want, yeah.
Hmm.
So right now we're reciting them in English.
Hmm.
Then we'll start reciting them in Latin, and then we'll
Hmm.
probably be singing more. The great thing, Father Bethel, who works with the Oblates there, he said one of the things about becoming a Benedictine Oblate is you get to sing all those great Benedictine tunes
Yes.
because they're not
Tunes.
the same as the Roman melodies.
Hmm.
They're slightly different,
Hmm.
and they are quite beautiful. Um, what were we talking about?
Oh, we're looking. I'm looking at it's this contemporary development of greater interest in chant, and
Yeah.
I see that it's a greater there's a greater interest in it. There seems to be some polarization about it, of course, in life, but I'm wondering if you can see, is a younger generation adopting chant? Is there some geometric progression going on here where more and more people are starting to realize the beauty of it and the subliminal nature of it, the supernatural drawing the mind and heart up? Because, as you said, in a sense, denying oneself, fasting from certain contemporary forms of music, and I don't want to make too much of that point, but at the same time, is there another generation? I mean, are there young, chant groups? Are there young Scola groups coming together? Do you see that in your work in the area of music? I think you have a vantage point. You see what's going on. What's happening with this?
I think there is a lot more interest, and um, certainly in the traditional mass community,
Mm-hmm.
every parish has a Scola, Gregorian Chant Scola,
Yes.
maybe two,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there's female Scolas cropping
Yes.
up,
Yes. Yes.
and so because when you sing in the propers, for a lot of the propers, it's better to have just one type of voice, either male voices or treble, female or children's
Yes.
voices.
Yes.
Not all of it, but most of it, because the chant was originally sung by either monasteries of men or monasteries of women.
Yes, yes. Even today, when you go to Rome, on my last trip to Rome, we all went to Vespers at the Basilica of Saint Cecilia, and of course, it's a group of nuns that sing it. So the female voices singing the chant, it's rather unique because we're used to hearing a scola if we're members of traditional Catholic communities that have the traditional mass. But to hear
Well,
the
it's
women's voice is interesting.
we're now less than 3 hours from the nuns at Ephesus, in
Yes,
Gower,
yes.
and it's always so beautiful to go down and hear them sing. And I was honored enough to be able to write a couple of pieces for them for their last CD. But one of those pieces was based on Mother Abbess, Mother Cecilia said, "Well, I'd like to the one of the responsories for Matins of Christ the King, Tua est Potentia," and she was just concerned. She just wanted the text,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but I looked at the chant and I thought, what, I'm going to write a piece of polyphony based on the chant,
Mm-hmm.
which was a very common technique back in the 15th and 16th century.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Is that you would write a piece on a pre-existing melody, or sometimes on a motet.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the other piece I wrote for them was I revoiced the Kyrie from the Missa Sicut Cervus that I wrote, which is based on the Palestrina motet. I revoiced that for women's voices.
Hmm.
So instead of SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, it was SSAA. So they recorded that also for their CD. And lost my train of thought. Oh, where is it going? Where's the chant going?
Yeah, yeah.
I think there is more and more groups singing it. What I would like to see, though, is more of a transgenerational
Mm-hmm.
approach to church music. And what I mean by that is I've been doing chant for 40 years,
Yes.
and over 40 years. And our family have all a lot of them have been choir directors and Scola directors.
Yes. Yes.
And what my goal is, both as a father and as someone who's been a church musician his whole life, is to have my kids' Scolas be better than my Scolas,
Yes.
and my grandkids' Scolas to be better than their parents' Scolas. So in other words, I don't want us to, like, okay, we start the chant, we get to this level, and then everything stops, and then we drop down here and we get to this level again, and then it stops. And I want it to just keep getting better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see a lot of people thinking through several generations. In other words, thinking past their own funeral.
Interesting.
And so
Interesting.
there's a lot of conferences and symposia where they're talking about chant, and to a certain extent, I'm not going to say they're all like this, but it's oftentimes just talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's about, isn't chant great? Well, we got to get past saying that chant is great, and then not just get into the big discussion of whether it should be this rhythmic system or that rhythmic system. But for me, I'm sold on the old Salem method, the
Mm-hmm.
classic Salem method,
Yes.
because it's great to it's easy to teach. I think it's easy to understand. And for me, it's allowed me to become a better and more involved chanter
Mm-hmm.
over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I would like to see.
Mm-hmm.
I would like, not only do we get to know these melodies better, but then we start to really enter into an understanding and an exploration and a meditation on what are these chant melodies telling us about the text.
Yes.
In this book here, in Laus in Ecclesia,
Mm-hmm.
they have some of the. It's great because it's not just instruction, but it does biographies and discourses on various aspects of the chant. But there's one section called the Sung Bible,
Yeah.
which is what Gregorian chant is for the most part.
Sure.
It's the Psalms.
Yes.
It's the communion antiphons are often taken right out of the Gospel of the
Directly.
day,
Yes. Yes.
and so you're singing these melodies. You're singing the Word of God, but it's the Word of God, and we can't plunge the depths of it in our lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does the chant do? The chant allows us to get some of that ineffability of God's Word in our recitation of the text. The communion, the name escapes me right now, but the one about the wedding feast at Cana.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When the head waiter or the steward says, most people serve the best wine first, but you've left the best wine for the end. And just the way it's written, it has this, I'm getting, goosebumps just thinking about
Yes.
the melody rising up.
Yes.
And that's what we should be doing. We should be saying, okay, we're going to sing the chant as well as we can, and we're going to drag as many people along with us, and then we die, and then they have the bug, they have the fire. They do the same thing with the people after them. It's like, you know what? You could take, excuse me, you could take a bantam hockey team, 14 and 15-year-olds, and they could probably beat every Stanley Cup champion before 1940.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because what happened is each generation the players got better and better and better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we got to be looking at as church musicians. So as chanters, that each generation, the chanters, the singers get better.
So you're painting a vision, and I love your hockey analogy. Let's go to parents then. What would you say to parents today who are listening to your words and are inspired by them and who believe that this is what we should do? What do parents do today to get their children to be this generation that you speak of? Is it the hockey analogy? Is there some sort of a minor league system that we developed, or should we forget the hockey analogy and what do we do? What do parents do today when they believe and want their children to rise to a higher level than the previous generation in chant?
Well, Catherine and I had a bunch of kids, and
Yes.
they're all very good musicians, and some of them are outstanding musicians. We started them, and this is mostly Catherine's doing, started them out in Suzuki piano.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
part of the Suzuki piano, I had a really negative image of Suzuki because I went through the traditional
Yes.
style of music education, and so one of the things they did is you'd get the tapes and then the CDs
Yes.
of the music that the kids would be playing on the piano.
Yes.
So you'd have Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and then you'd have variations of it. So you'd have,
Yes.
da 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 da.
I remember this well.
And it was to develop their technique on the repeated notes and then getting them to do it rhythmically. Da 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 da
Yes.
da 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 da. So what I would say, but that's what our kids would listen to the Suzuki CD after we said prayers. They'd listen to the Suzuki CDs to go to
Sure.
sleep.
Sure.
So what I would say, the first thing is you got to get your kids listening to it,
Huh.
and you have to listen to it too.
Yes.
And if you don't like it, you have to learn how to like it.
Mhm.
And I think that's true because, Aristotle says in the Nicomachean Ethics, the virtuous man is not just the man who does what the virtuous man does, but he does it with the correct disposition.
Mhm.
And so he orders himself or disciplines himself to like those things that are excellent and that are should be done by a virtuous man.
Mhm.
And so I think listening is the first thing. And in fact, I wouldn't even say, like, for me, we pretty well have only listened to chant done according to the old Solemn method.
Mhm. Mhm.
For me,
Mhm.
I listen to every chant recording I can get hold of, whether
Mhm.
it's Old Solemn, New Solemn, Carmelites, Dominicans, um, secular groups. Listen to them all
Mhm.
because you can learn something from everybody.
Yes.
And the one thing that you'll hear if you listen to all the different chant styles, you'll find out that the ones that get recorded are the ones that are sung robustly, the ones that are sung as if these people are singing about something they're willing to be martyred for.
Yes. Yes. Powerful language there. Yes. Yes. So listening, what about the doing? So let's say you're in the family home, you are teaching an appreciation for chant to your children. You're listening, you're doing these things that you've suggested. Where do you go for help? Do you go to your local Scola and ask the Scola director to bring your children into the rehearsals or something? What do you do, Mark, on that point?
Well, you can do that. You can start off by singing the four Marian antiphons when we do our family rosary.
Yes.
Uh, if we don't recite the Hail Holy Queen,
Yes.
we do the seasonal antiphon. So right
Yes.
now we're singing the Regina Caeli
Chile, yes.
at the end of our rosary.
Mhm.
You could talk to the choir director or the Scola director.
Mhm.
It's likely he might not have time for that.
Mhm.
But I am personally, I'm going to start teaching a course according to the Lausan Ecclesia. This is, if you don't want to learn Old Solemn, this isn't the book for you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But if you do, and that's what I learned from my brother back in the 80s, he went over to the Scola Saint Grégoire in France and learned there. And he came back, taught us very well. It's a great method to sing the chant, or a way to understand how you should sing the chant. So I would have people, at least from my standpoint, if you're asking what I'd like them to do,
Yes.
I would like them to check in at my website and see when I'm going to be starting the next course, the level 1 in Lausan Ecclesia.
Yeah.
And I said, you can sing whatever method you want, but I think the old Solemn method is the best, and it would be the most understandable, I think, for most people. Some people disagree with that, but you know what? It has there is a curious comment. I think it was in History of Western Music by Donald J. Grout, and he said he's talking about all these conflicting methods,
Mm-hmm.
and he says it's there's all these different ways of doing it. He says one thing that the old Solemn method has going for it, though, is a history and a copious amount of recordings.
Yes. Interesting.
And so not only is that important because there's a lot of it, but the fact is it sustained a monastery for over 100 years.
Yes.
And then Salem founded Fongambeau, and Fongambeau was
Mhm.
devoted to the old Salem method. In fact, their cantors would study at the Scola Saint Gregoire, and then Fongambeau founded Clear Creek.
Yes. Yes.
And now Clear Creek has founded a daughter house in New Mexico.
Yes.
So is the old Salem method authentic? There's probably good chunks of it that aren't.
Hmm.
But you know what? It sustains a monastic spirituality. And it has for decades and decades and decades. And it sustained me to such an extent that I've sung opera, I've sung art song, I've conducted secular choirs, musical theater. I write polyphony. I've written secular music. But if I could only choose one repertoire, it would be Gregorian chant.
So amazing. So amazing. Mark, we're coming to the natural end of this hour. It's too bad because we'll have to have another discussion at some point. We'll do this further because there's so many other aspects I want to cover with you. But I'm thinking now that you've brought us to the contemporary times where Clear Creek, for example, it's right here in our own time, probably underappreciated in so many ways. But you've given us a prescription for parents what to do, children what to do, how to create an intergenerational transfer of knowledge and an improvement in performance, you could say, and chant is not merely performance. I know that. Maybe to bring us to a conclusion, what are you doing? What you are making a living at this, and you have some offerings and you have a website and so on. Tell us about that so that we can see where to find you, where to follow you.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we did move down to Omaha.
Yes.
I can from Vancouver. Lived in Canada almost my whole life, and I just got word that my green card application has been accepted.
There you are.
I just got that this morning. That notice this morning. So it's almost hard for me to believe, but once I really abandoned myself to God's providence, once he made it clear to me that he wanted me to compose and promote Gregorian chant, compose music, church music, particularly for the traditional rite, and of course any music I write for the traditional rite can be used in the new rite.
Yes.
But compose music for the traditional rite and promote Gregorian chant.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he's done is he's actually made it so that it's possible for me to support my family. So if someone is interested in me writing a piece for them, a commission, I just this morning I got an email back from a fellow who asked for a piece to be commissioned for his brother's baptism and confirmation.
Beautiful.
So you could go to mark@vocalart.org, or you could go to my website, markemersondonnelly.com. If you want a piece written, drop me a line and we can talk about it. I write organums, which is I have a style of organum called Organum Novi Mundi. One of the pieces, the monks at Clear Creek just recently recorded a CD. I was down there for that.
Yes,
in Easter week.
I remember that. Yes.
And one of my organums I refashioned. I can't. I mean, most of my stuff I've written for church choir, and now I
Yes.
find I'm writing more and more for for religious communities.
Yes.
So the monks really liked the organum that I wrote, and the organums, you know, if you talk to anyone like Chris Sewin, you know, they're quite popular. I think it's a way of, in a certain sense, softening the austerity of the chant by the introduction of harmony. But it's I don't know. I guess go to my YouTube channel, vocalart.ca, and you know, listen to some of the organums. See what you think. Leave comments.
Yeah.
Um,
Good
but
idea.
what people say is that sort of thing is it's quite unique. It's not polyphony, and it's not pure chant. Um, and so you know, this is the Catholic CEO. We've been friends for a long time, and we've talked about. I mean, you've been very supportive of me for many years, and uh, and encouraging. And you've also seen me in some of my low points. Um,
I've seen what I've seen in you is the talent and the ability, and I see that it's possible to. It's a challenge, but it's possible to create honestly, um, work around this so that one can support a family. And you have a big family, and you need to support your family. And so I have been, as you have rightly said, Mark, I'm very positive about the fact that you have the ability, and that I think people need to appreciate that. And I would like to see more people, you know, do commissions and actually have works done, or invite you to come and teach and show and display and demonstrate how this is done. So I'm with you, and we're going to list in the show notes. We'll put all of your links so that everybody can see where you're going to go with this. And so, you know, as we come to a conclusion for this, I appreciate greatly that you have this ability, because it's a rare talent, I think. And I think that it's something that is, you know, all in all, to me, chant lifts our minds and hearts to God in ways that other forms of expression do not. And so for that reason, I'm very positive about it. And I think what we'll do is we'll have to have you come back at some point, and we'll talk further, because there are some other topics that we need to get to. So I think, Mark, thanks so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor, really. And so thanks very much for being with us today.
well, you're welcome, Henry. God bless you.
Thanks, and God bless you, Mark. So it's the Catholic CEO, Henry Kutarna. We've had Mark Emerson Donnelly with us today, composer, conductor of chant, Scolas, chant expert, husband and father of 9. Mark, it's been a great pleasure to have you. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time on the Catholic CEO.